Hillary. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first program of the 2021 Landmark Lecture Series. This year, we'll be exploring the history of our neighborhood, Georgetown. We'll be presenting 6 programs in the series this year, each one on a unique topic. Next month, members of the Georgetown Garden Club will discuss the history of the club and its service to the Georgetown community. In June, I will be presenting on the Civil War hospitals of Georgetown. We'll take a break for the summer months and return with a program about women and slavery in Georgetown in September, with Elsa Mendoza from the Georgetown Slavery Archive at Georgetown University. George Hill from Oak Hill Cemetery will be discussing the cemetery's iconic architectural structures at our program in October. And Jerry McCoy from the Peabody Room at Georgetown Public Library will share with us some of the artwork from that collection that documents both the residents and the landscapes of Georgetown. So you can find out more information about all of these programs and even register for them at our website at tudorplace.org. This evening, we're pleased to welcome our friends and partners from Georgetown Heritage, who will highlight the history of the C&O Canal in Georgetown and discuss the future of the canal as it's envisioned through the Georgetown Canal Plan. Jeffrey I. Nichols is the Executive Director of Georgetown Heritage. Prior to joining Georgetown Heritage, he was President and CEO of Thomas Jefferson's Poplar Forest in Lynchburg, Virginia, and the Mark Twain House and Museum in Hartford, Connecticut. Jeffrey also serves on the Board of Directors of the Virginia Association of Museums. Kelly Schindler is Director of Education and Partnerships with Georgetown Heritage. Previously, she spent 8 years with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, where she worked collaboratively and creatively with historic sites and nonprofits across the country with a particular focus on engaging young people with cultural heritage. We're pleased to have both of you here this evening and welcome everyone to the Landmark Lecture Series.
All right.
Thank you for having us, Mark. It's wonderful to be here. I am Jeff Nichols, Executive Director of Georgetown Heritage, and thank you for having us tonight. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Kelly Schindler, to kick off tonight's presentation. Kelly, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Great. All right. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us this evening. We're very excited to talk with you about the past and future of the C&O Canal in Georgetown. I did want to talk a little bit about Georgetown Heritage as an organization. In 2014, we're a philanthropic partner of the National Park Service. We work very closely with the C&O Canal, National Historical Park, Rock Creek Park, and a number of other units of the National Park Service in the region. And our primary, our mission is to restore, enliven, and interpret historic Georgetown. But our first priority is to restore and revitalize the mile-long section of the C&O Canal that runs through Georgetown. And that's really what we're going to be talking about tonight. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the history of the canal, including some Tudor Place connections. And Jeff is going to tell you a little bit more about Georgetown Heritage's plans for the canal and its future. So with that, just a quick orientation of the C&O Canal. It is 184.5 miles long, beginning in Georgetown at mile marker 0, right on the Potomac. And it goes all the way up to Cumberland, Maryland, following alongside the Potomac River. The C&O stands for Chesapeake and Ohio. The canal was formed to move goods from the Georgetown area west and bring crops and coal and many other things east back into the city. Construction began on the canal in Georgetown in 1828 until 1831. And an important part of constructing this area of the canal, particularly the area that's in Montgomery County, just out past DC, was Seneca Quarry, which some of you from Tudor Place may know was owned by the Peter family from 1781 to 1866. John Parke Custis Peter was largely in control of the quarry during the time that the canal was being constructed, and actually the quarry provided some of the stonework to construct the canal, a number of locks actually, as well as an aqueduct. So if you've ever been to some of the locks out that way, even some of the lock houses are constructed out of this stone. So Seneca Quarry, really, you can see some of the ruins here, really played an integral role in the construction of the canal. The Peter family also used the canal to move stone into DC to construct some of our most famous landmarks, which we'll take a look at in just a little bit here. But there is this very interesting relationship in the family and the quarry helping to build the canal, but then also use it to complete some later work in the city itself. These are some images of some of the structures along the canal that are constructed out of the stone quarried at the Seneca Quarry. As I mentioned, a number of lock houses, Riley's Lock and the aqueduct, that's some of what we're seeing here. Many of these structures can also be found in Seneca Creek State Park in Maryland. As I mentioned, the quarry itself is largely ruins, but there are some preserved structures that you can go and visit as well. So thought it was interesting that this stone that John Park Custis Peter, his own is carved out of stone from the Seneca Quarry. As I mentioned, the Peter family used the canal to bring in stone for some of the buildings that it was used to construct here in DC. Smithsonian Castle, of course, is the most famous. So here we see all of these structures in that same red stone brought out from Seneca Quarry. So a nice connection here between Tudor Place and the C&O Canal. I did also want to mention this is a log of laborers who were paid for working in the quarry, particularly when they were working on cutting stone for the Smithsonian Castle. There is a book by Mark Auslander called The Smithsonian Castle and Seneca Quarry. It's a great book, and this actually, he analyzed a lot of these logs and found that it was very likely enslaved laborers that were cutting the stone. I did want to mention that enslaved labor was likely used in constructing this early era of the well, as well as immigrant labor. Many Irish, German immigrants came to work on the C&O Canal, particularly in its earliest construction period in Georgetown. And this is part of the new interpretation that Georgetown Heritage is going to offer on our new canal boat tour, which Jeff is going to talk to you a little bit about, and some other public programs. It's something that the National Park Service is also, you can find out more information on their website, and it's something they offer in their programs as well, talking about the laborers that came and built the canal. Resuming our historical tour here, as I mentioned, construction finishes in Georgetown in 1831, and the canal finally reaches Cumberland, Maryland in 1850. Interestingly, the canal, it goes from being cutting edge technology to having some competition rather quickly. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad begins construction around the same time. And of course, railroad travel quickly surpasses canal travel in terms of ease of getting from place to place. So the canal starts as this technological marvel, but is sort of it starts to be outpaced even from the outset by other modes of transportation. It's operated until 1924. It earns itself the nickname, the Grand Old Ditch. And I do love these historic images of the canal in Georgetown, particularly the one on the right of the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge. You can see here a canal boat being towed by mules. Mules that was how the boats got from Georgetown to Cumberland and back, was all through mule power along the towpath. And these images really show what the canal was like sort of in its heyday here in Georgetown. Now, of course, with the canal after 1924 not being used as a canal, as a navigable route anymore, fell into sort of a period of disuse. There were plans at one time to turn it into a parkway, something like what the Clara Barton Parkway became in Maryland. We really owe a lot to Justice Douglas. He is a Supreme Court justice, and as well as a great environmentalist and preservationist who believed that the canal should be preserved. It was made a national monument in 1961 and became the C&O Canal National Historical Park in 1971. You can see here Justice Douglas, he led a walk, Georgetown, Cumberland, walked the whole thing. And you can see here him, I believe this is him returning, and I do love one of the signs. You can see someone in the boat holding up, "May Justice Douglas prevail." So I always liked that one, but it becomes a National Historical Park. I also wanted to note that I think we have some colleagues from the park here with us tonight, so welcome. And this is how many of us in Georgetown likely experienced the canal as the national park. It went from becoming, a place of industry and work to one of the few units of the National Park Service with public use and recreation in its establishing legislation in Congress. So some of you may have some memories of experiencing the park this way: ice skating, strolling along the towpath, perhaps taking a ride on the Georgetowner. This was the boat that was operated by the National Park Service for over 40 years in Georgetown. And today, this may be a scene that some of us are more familiar with. There is a lot going on in the canal at this juncture. The National Park Service faced many budget cuts over the past few years, which made it difficult to maintain the canal. The canal boat, as I mentioned, ceased operations in 2011. But recently, Georgetown Heritage has helped the National Park Service to secure funding to complete a lot of essential preservation work, which I know Jeff is going to talk about, and of course you may have seen for yourselves. This work is helping to get water back into the canal, and this is really a key point in the canal's history. We're working very closely with our colleagues at the National Park Service to preserve the canal's unique features, but also keep it physically, financially sustainable for the future. And with that, I think I'm ready to turn things over to Jeff. Yes.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And as Kelly mentioned, the park has a wonderful, interesting history, both in industrial use and a recreational use. And interesting enough, they're both about equal amount of time now, almost 100 years for both. And so that enabling legislation really is, I think, a liberating piece for everyone involved with the C&O Canal, particularly the park itself, because it allows you to do so many things along the canal that, and maybe other more historic sites, you wouldn't have that opportunity. And so what I'd like to talk about with you for the next few minutes is the Georgetown Canal Plan. Talk to you a little bit about the history of that, how it started, some of the projects that are going to happen, what our goals are, how we're going about that work, giving you a view of a few of the sections of the canal as the design sits today, and I'll talk about that, as well as some short-term improvements we're doing as we speak tonight, and a few coming up in the next few months, to try to return that stuff to the canal water. And I know those who live in Georgetown have been hoping and praying for water returning to the canal for a while. I'll explain why it's taken so long as well. And then really the reason that Georgetown Heritage was founded back in 2014 was to return a canal boat to Washington. And our boat is basically completed. It's just waiting to be returned. And I'll talk a little bit about that, show you some images of it, and then wrap up for your questions. So as Kelly laid out, the C&O is a wonderful park, 184.5 miles long. It's now the 8th most visited national park in the country. It may not seem like it is, but considering the length of it and the fact that it's a towpath, in a place like DC, it's not only a recreational facility, but some people use it to commute to work, to school. One of my board members talked about doing that her career, walking along the canal. So it has a very diverse use and very diverse needs. And Georgetown is a very unique place in that whole 184.5 miles. It's certainly the most urban area. It was the destination. The only place where the towpath actually switched sides of the canal. Walking from Cumberland, Maryland, you get to the 34th Street Bridge. Technically, you're supposed to cross over that bridge and go onto the other side of the canal. Causes confusion, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But our goal is to help the National Park Service and the C&O Canal to revitalize this section of the canal and turn it into the park we all want to have. And we're not alone in this endeavor. We have been working, of course, with the National Park Service. There's really 3 organizations from the Park Service involved. There's, of course, the C&O Canal National Historical Park. Rock Creek is also part of this canal, a section of it down by, of course, Rock Creek. And then the regional office based in DC, the 3 NPS sites involved. Of course, we're the organization that is sort of managing the day-to-day activities of the Georgetown Canal Plan. One of our fathers of this organization is the Georgetown Business Improvement District, the BID. We really were formed out of a group of partners, both business folks and residents and the BID back in 2014. And the entire project to this point, including the construction of the boat, has been paid for by this city. And they have a seat at this table as well. So it's really been a great partnership. But as you know, with any large group like this, it takes time to work through all the issues and challenges that the project has. And I'll walk through some of those and give you a good sense of where we are. Next slide, please, Kelly. So the reason for the canal plan is pretty obvious. The canal in Georgetown clearly has been in need of some preservation and some restoration, and we hope a few enhancements. And working with our partners over the last several years on a design concept with our firm JCFO, which is James Corner Field Operations based in New York, we've over the years worked through this environmental assessment, this sort of base level of what we think we'll be able to do along the canal. It doesn't mean everything in the canal plan will show up in the final project, but certainly it's objects to explore. And I believe Hillary will be sharing a link to the Park Service's website where you can look at all of this material for yourself. It's all public in the public domain. So after the presentation, if you want to learn more, you can feel, there it is. Thank you, Hillary. You can feel free to click on that and take a look around and see how this project has transformed over time. And it really is going to focus on, as you see in the image in the lower right-hand side, the towpath. That's a major restoration project to get that back to its natural width, or its design width, I should say, to make it more accessible for all users. We're working with all of our partners to make it, we hope, ADA or ABIS in the parks lingo compliant, so that, again, accessibility is a huge part of this. But also, as you see, educational opportunities and other amenities that we might be able to provide along the canal to enhance the visitor experience. We're very cautious of making sure that we preserve the historic artifact first. The canal is not only a functioning stream going through the middle of the community, it's a historic site. And so being very careful not to do any damage to that is job one for all of us in our plan. So again, you want to dig a little deeper, see some more images, feel free to go to that website. Next slide, please, Kelly. And what are some of our key focus areas and our goals? Well, the area outlined in the red dot is essentially the work area that we're focusing on. Working sort of left to right on the image as you're sort of heading west to east, you first encounter the Georgetown section by the Key Bridge and the Potomac Aqueduct, and then weave your way through the city and cross 4 locks, and then get to the confluence, the point of where the canal actually connects with Rock Creek, and down Rock Creek to the Potomac River and the tide lock. And so for us, that's the mile section or so that we're focused on. And what we're trying to do, and one major aspect of what we're trying to do, is connect Potomac Aqueduct back to the tide lock. If you've ever tried to walk that length and then get to the tide lock, it's a fun adventure. First, you cross over from the south side of the canal to the north side at the 34th Street Bridge. If you miss that, you get a little lost along the way. And there isn't a clear connection. So you can imagine a bicyclist, and this happens all the time, who starts off in Cumberland, Maryland. They get 183.5 miles completed in their journey, and they want to get down to the tide lock where mile marker 0 is to take the photograph, to have that completed adventure, and you're lost. We've run into it many times telling bikers how to get down there, or hikers. This plan will help to solve those issues and enhance all of these places. So I'm going to talk just about a couple of the spots in the next slide. One is referred to as the lawn or the locks, and here it is. This should be fairly familiar. It's between Thomas Jefferson and 30th Street in Georgetown. Starting with the lower, thank you, Kelly, lower left-hand corner, the existing conditions. The Park Service over the last few years has restored Lock 3 and Level 3. And so they look much better and are functioning the way they should. But obviously, there's still more work to do. And so as we were looking at this, how can we activate this spot where there's this large sort of lawn area, as you can see in that photo as well, which obviously in a place like Georgetown, green space is hard to come by. And so part of this plan is to find a way to activate that space, make it a more public space, make it a more inviting space for visitors who come to Georgetown or go on the C&O Canal. And also, if you look at the top right-hand image, the drawing, you will, the sort of the map, I should say, you will see a canal boat sitting in what's known as Level 3. That's where the boat will live. That's its berth, where passengers will load and unload. And so having a convenient spot where folks can wait, where they can experience some other activities, get some shade. All those green circles are obviously trees. All the green circles that have white dots in the middle are new trees. So we're hoping to add trees and add shade to these areas as this plan develops to make it, again, a comfortable, inviting spot for residents and visitors alike. And there's a couple of other items I want to point out on this. And Kelly, I don't know if you can use the mouse to point out the existing visitor center building, perhaps. There you are. And up on the map, please, on the right-hand side on the top. Thank you. Right there. That's the existing visitor center. I'll talk more about that in a minute, the C&O Canal Visitor Center. And another piece of this canal plan is to develop a visitor center for Georgetown, for the C&O Canal and for the community. If you mind pointing that out, Kelly, on the map for me. Thank you. That's as far as the design has gone, that rectangle at the moment. But it's something we'd love to be able to do to, provide a great experience for people as they come to Georgetown. And we don't want to lose the historic integrity and the charm of the canal. A big discussion point we've had with the National Park Service is they want to have continuity of the entire 184.5 miles. And that's a lot of things, from the surface materials used on the towpath to the amenities you find. So it's really this interesting balance that we're trying to achieve as we design this work to achieve all the goals we want, from convenience and visitor experience, but also maintaining the historic site, as I'm sure Tudor Place and every other museum I've worked at deals with all the time. Next slide, Kelly. This is mile marker 0. If you look at the lower left-hand corner, you will see the Potomac River. Obviously, there's Kennedy Center, a little blurry in this photo, on the left, and Roosevelt Island on the right side. this is really a wonderful little spot, and it's sort of lost. It's a lost section of the canal because it's hard to find. It's nestled next to Thompson's Boat Center, which is a very active place. And I remember the first time I visited and walked down there, I wasn't sure if I could cut across Thompson's boat parking lot to get there, whether it was private or public. It's obviously public, but we want to clarify those things. And so if you look at the map on the top right-hand side, you'll see the addition of a new bridge connecting the Rock Creek Trail to the mile marker 0, the tide lock area, and a trail off to the left behind the Thompson Boat Center that will connect it to the rest of the C&O Canal. But this idea, again, is to bring this place to life. I was down there just a couple of Saturdays ago with my wife, and it's a really wonderful spot. It's one of the few places in Georgetown, I think the only place, you can actually get right next to the water. And it again, like a lot of it, there's improvements that can be made and maintenance that can be done that would make this place really special. And there's also, of course, a complex next to it called the Watergate, as we all know, which gets its name partially from a Watergate that used to exist right there. So it also has this wonderful connection with American history. And on the lower right-hand side, you'll see an image of what the park could look like. And I keep mentioning what it can look like because we're still very early in this design process, maybe 15 to 20% of the way in. We've been at it for several years, but it's a large, complex project that takes a lot of effort to move along. And our colleague, Scott Walzak, who has been leading the design work from our perspective, he's been sort of the project manager, equates this canal project to, the way he puts it, is that it's actually more complex than building a stadium. And it has to do with the fact that it's historic, that it cuts through an urban center. The ownership is a hoot. Of course, the national park owns a great deal of it. But as you know, living in the community, there are buildings directly on top of the canal walls. Who owns those? All of that had to be discovered and figured out. And so we are, we have all that figured out, but it just adds to the complexity and the challenge of a project like this. So I know if you think it's taking a long time to accomplish, it's also not inexpensive to do all this work. So we're trying to move along at a pace that's appropriate for our organization and for our partners. Okay, Kelly, next slide, please. But in the last several months, there have been a lot of progress that we've been making on preservation projects, restoration projects, and even a stabilization project. I'll walk you through a couple of those right now. Starting with the image on the left, if you've crossed the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge in Georgetown recently, you've seen these steel girders going up and essentially a flying buttress being installed. And that's there for a very specific reason. One thing that we've done, the partners, at the beginning of this project was to do a structural analysis of the canal itself. And even on the image of the right, you can see why. After 200 years of use and wear and tear, things need to be repaired. And so the firm that did it looked at the canal and found a number of places that needed to be preserved or restored. And this, the image on the left is one of those locations. It's a corner really of Wisconsin Avenue and Gray Street. You've been to Chaya Taqueria right above that, or Pinstripes on the other side of the canal. That's sort of the area we're talking about. But this is going in to help stabilize that part of the canal wall. And it's, believe it or not, even though it looks really elaborate, it's a temporary structure until the Park Service goes in and restores the walls back to their original design in the years to come. The other thing that the park is doing right now, as you can see in the image on the right, is restoring some of the lock gates. And a lock on a canal is essentially just an elevator, lifting about up or down to match the water level wherever you happen to be. And in Georgetown, there are these 4 locks in a row. If you count the tide lock, it's 5. And so as you sort of look through this image, under the 29th Street Bridge, you'll see lock 1 with its gates open, and this is lock 2. They're putting in the upper gates right now. I think they're putting in the lower gates soon as well. And so they're doing some of that work to restore the integrity of the locks. And all of this is important for a number of reasons. One, obviously, for the historical accuracy, to get it looking the way it should, to make the canal function. And the C&O Canal in Georgetown is also part of the flood control of Georgetown. So it's very important that these gates are able to be opened during a flooding condition so that we can allow water to drain through the city and back into the Potomac. So functioning gates are absolutely critical. And I'm sure you see New Jersey barriers sitting there and you're wondering, what are New Jersey barriers doing in the bottom of a 200-year-old canal? That's actually one of two dry docks that were built for the original Georgetown boat. And I'll talk about that in my next slide. So next slide, please, Kelly. And there we are. There are two dry docks. One, as you saw, in level 2, and this one is in level 4, right by the 31st Street Bridge. And for those local residents in DC, I'm sure you're very happy that that bridge is finally finished after several years of construction and delays. We are going to rehab that dry dock this spring, in the next couple of months, to fit the new boat that was obviously designed for the old boat that Kelly mentioned. That was there for some 40 years. You also notice that there are these dolphins, as they call them, these piers in front of what is a historic pier under the bridge, 31st Street Bridge. And those, of course, are to keep us from bouncing our boat off of that. And on the right side, you'll also see in the far right-hand corner is the corner of the existing C&O Canal building. And you'll notice that some of the sidewalk has been torn up. That's also our handiwork. We are currently installing boat utilities, both water, electricity, and sewage for our new boat. Everything will be put back together exactly the way it was when we're complete with it in the next a month or two, Kelly, I think it is, of work. And that's so we can plug our boat in at night. It's actually an electric boat. I'll get to that in just a moment. But one other thing, the C&O Canal Visitor Center, the reddish building on the right, is also in line for a major rehab. The park this year, I believe it's still this year, we'll be doing a complete rehab of the exterior of the building. So they'll repoint the bricks, they'll replace windows, do everything they can to preserve the integrity of that wonderful little building. So this area is going to be transformed over the next few months as we complete our projects. And we have a new boat arriving, as we mentioned before. So Kelly, would you go to the next slideshow? Present slide. As I mentioned early on, the whole reason Georgetown Heritage was founded was to help raise money to bring the canal boat back to Georgetown. As time went on, it went from helping to raise the money to actually paying for the design and then operating it over time. So Georgetown Heritage, it will own and operate this new canal boat. And if you look at the image on the left-hand side, top image, that's a digital rendering of the boat. It's about 80 feet long, about 12.5 feet wide. It has two power sources. Unlike the original boat, it can be towed by mules. The Park Service still has mules that we can bring down, and they can tow these. I should say this is very light work for the mules, considering what they can pull on a canal boat. But I think an important change that our predecessors, Kelly and our predecessors, came up with was to add its own power source. And so there are two battery-powered motors that will be on this. So no diesel fumes, no other smells. It's going to be very quiet, but it can be powered under its own way. So we can operate this boat independently. And what's interesting is this is actually designed after a typical packet boat that would have been used on a canal like the C&O Canal. And in fact, if you look at the picture on the lower left, we even used some of the historic images and I believe some artifacts that the park had of some original boats. That is a painting by an artist named John Lewis Wellington, lived from the late 19th century all the way to 1965. And he made these paintings along the C&O Canal around the turn of the 20th century, so as a younger man. And so you see this family, which quite often these boats were run by families at one point in the canal history. And you see that sort of Kelly green color on the trim. And so obviously that is brought forward to the new boat. A couple of other key changes from this boat and the old Georgetown boat. There's a lot more of synthetic material in ours, man-made materials to enhance the durability. But everywhere you sort of will be able to interact with the boat will be traditional materials, wood, for example. But we wanted to make it as durable, as long-lasting, and as maintenance-free as you possibly can with a boat, knowing full well that boats take a lot of maintenance. So we really put a lot of thought into making this happen. It is also ADA compliant, and it, unlike the old boat, it also has a head or a restroom on it. And so we think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the Georgetown community. And we're still looking for a naming right for it as well. That's why the name board on back is still empty. So it's another opportunity down the road potentially for some fun. And we, besides this, there are two other projects we're working on in the canal. One is to restore, at least temporarily, some bridge ramps, very similar to what you see in these images. As you cross over the 34th Street Bridge and the Potomac Street Bridge, they are in need of maintenance. And so we're putting down 3 different materials in partnership with our friends and the National Park Service to test different samples of materials that we might be able to use for the towpath going forward. So you'll see that this spring as well. And we're also, finally, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a kayak and a canoe in the canal. Well, you'll be able to do that soon. We're putting in a canoe and kayak deck that will be going in. We hope this spring. We're still targeting that. We'll see how it all plays out. But you'll be able to bring your own boat down and jump into the canal and go for a paddle. And for those of you who live in DC or visit the canal quite a bit, obviously the water has been down for some time. And a lot of it has to do with the projects I've mentioned, from the 31st Street Bridge to the work we're doing today. But the plan is, once we have all of our work completed, which should be in the next 2 months, the park will get into DC and clear some of the woody growth. They will pull out trees and various other things. We'll get in there and help clean out the canal. Obviously, it is also a place where a lot of, unfortunately, plastics collect. Water will return. The park will come in and harvest cattails using a aquatic harvester. Our boat will be delivered. We'll practice a bit, and then hopefully by the end of the summer, and I'm being relatively vague because if you've ever built anything or worked on your house, you know that things sometimes pop up. But our goal is to have the boat in the water and running late summer. And the canal will have water in it for the next 1.5 years. And then the park has some significant resources to do major repairs to the canal. Again, part of this project has been looking at ways to do that. And they've, with our help, have been able to secure a significant amount of money to restore locks 1 and 2 and do a lot of repairs to the canal walls. So there will be a point beginning on about 2 years, maybe a little over 2 years now, where the canal will be closed for about 18 months, but it will be completely restored and the water will return on a permanent long-term basis, hopefully for the next 50 years after that. So our goal, again, is to help the park in any way we can to create scenes that you see, these wonderful experiences in Georgetown. And with that, I want to thank you all for having Kelly and I with you tonight, and we'll be happy to take questions. I saw a few pop up. We'd be happy to answer those. So thank you very much.
I thank you so much. I learned quite a bit. I'm looking forward to seeing more. from you all, and I've worked with Kelly on some school programming, and you guys are wonderful partners. So I'm looking forward to continuing those partnerships. Lots of questions coming in, and as a fan of the TV show How I Met Your Mother, I have to make the joke that they're a group of questions I can only call boats, boats, boats. So I have a segment of questions about boats. We'll start with some boats and then go from there. What happened to the previous boat or boats? Have they been preserved in some way? Did they end up somewhere? Do they exist?
Sure. We can speak of the previous boat called the Georgetown. It was in DC for about 40 years until 2011. When sequestration came down back at that point, there were pretty significant budget cuts to the Park Service, and this was part of that. They were sort of a victim of that, and the park had to stop running boat tours. And it also was at the end of its life cycle. It was a wooden boat, 40 years old. It was towed out back in 2014, I believe, Kelly, and it does not exist anymore. There wasn't much to save, unfortunately.
Sounds like it served a good life in that
It
time.
did. It had a great life, and it went to the canal graveyard in the sky, I guess.
And as far as historic boats go, there were a number of different kinds of boats that operated on the canal through its lengthy history. Not very many survive, and you'll find this is common in many canals. I will say that the Park Service does have other historically inspired packet boats that it operates in other parts of the canal. I think of the Mercer is another great example of a historically inspired canal boat, but part of that is, the canal boats were sort of fairly ephemeral, but also there was a period of time where the canal, after it ceased to be operated by the canal company, it underwent, and you can find more of this on the Park Service website, but a number of the canal boats, they each used to have unique names, and different canaler families operated them. But that canal culture changed once the canal company no longer operated it. The canal boats were painted more uniformly. They had, numbers and letters instead of names. And so I highly encourage you, I think that website's in the chat. There's a whole section on what happens to the canal, 20th century after 1924, when it ceases to be an operable canal, but the time before it's a National Historical Park. And that tells you a little bit about these different kinds of vessels and sort of how they were operated, and then how that changed over time. So highly encourage you all to give that a read if that's something you're interested in learning more about.
And then to continue on the theme of boats, where was the boat, the new boat made?
Sure, I could jump on that one, Kelly. It was designed in Alexandria, a company called Tridentis, which is a firm that usually works for the U.S. military, which is not a big shock, and Coast Guard. But they took on this project, and it's being built in Dundalk, Maryland. It's a community just outside of Baltimore, at a small boat works called Rotabush. And they've done a wonderful job of putting it together for us. And even getting it here is going to be quite an adventure. It's, as I mentioned, 80 feet long, so it cannot be towed in one piece. So it's going to be trucked down in half, in two pieces, brought into DC onto Canal Road, assembled there on Canal Road, craned into the canal, floated down to Dry Dock 4, where it will be, the final assembly will take place in there. It'll take about an extra week once we have it all hammered out, and then finally it'll be seaworthy. So it's going to be a fun adventure on its own part. Taking a lot of coordination, a lot of time and energy, but we're getting there.
That sounds like we should set up a time-lapse video tripod out on the water, see how that goes.
Yeah, sure. Hopefully
we've thought about it. Yeah, we've thought about it.
I enjoyed the spectacle of when they switched the shuttles. So I feel like this is on par with that boat coming into town, the way that the shuttles came into town and went across.
Yep.
Another question about the boat. Will there be mules towing it chiefly, or the using the motor? Which kind of, and I'm interested in kind of when I can see the mules versus when it'll be motored.
Yeah, the mules are always a topic. So the boat was designed to be able, as Jeff said, to run under mule power, or it can use the electric motors. The Park Service did recently acquire 2 new mules. They are in their current training season right now. So that's part of what we're working with, is not only do we have the new boat coming, but we also have new mules coming, and they are in what one of my colleagues at the National Park Service has termed mule school. So we have to also wait for mule school to be complete. Obviously, with the pandemic and the current coronavirus restrictions, we're also thinking about, how could we have the mules in Georgetown safely with a handler? We used to have the Park Service used to hold Meet the Mules events in Georgetown. How might we do that with social distancing and not attracting the crowd? So we're still working on exactly how the mules will be in Georgetown for this sort of atypical inaugural boat season, but we do hope to have them here once they have successfully graduated from mule school. Do expect that tours will be primarily conducted using the electric motors for this first season. And then we'll see if on our next season, when hopefully we are in a more pandemic-free space, the mules have graduated. We're hoping to have them here on a more regular schedule, but that's sort of where we are for now.
Well, I have a 6-year-old who would love to come and meet the mules, so. A lot of interest in where the kayak dock will be located.
Sure. The kayak dock will be up by the 34th Street Bridge, which is not far from 34th Street Bridge. So it'll be in front of 3333 Water Street on the south side of the canal. That's where will be installed, and it'll be a public access point there.
Wow, that's great. That sounds like a great benefit to just the recreation in the area.
In fact, that even predates, that idea predates the canal plan. It was something that the Georgetown did and others had wanted to do, and it just, like everything else, it takes a little longer than you expect, but we hope to get it in this spring.
So far, I think that's all the boat questions, but I'm sure there'll be more. So pop more boat questions in there. Some earlier questions that have come up that I'm kind of just circling back and grabbing. Kelly, there was a question in the image you showed of the cemetery. Which cemetery was that? I think I know the answer, but
I believe it's either at Montevideo or near Montevideo.
Yeah.
Hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly, Tudor Place folks.
Yes.
Thank you. I will double check, and when I find the source, I will add it in the chat.
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah. Good. Once you see that red sandstone and you see the castle, you just start to see it all over the city. That color is very distinctive, and I think it gives DC a very DC feel when you go through. And there was a question, what kind of stone was mined at Seneca Quarry? And it is a sandstone. If you didn't see, I popped that into the chat as well. And you'll see it elsewhere in Georgetown, downtown as well. Kind of pops out. There was a question if there'd be any area for bee pollination or bird watching, and kind of that type of recreation as well.
Well, part of this plan is to restore a lot of the banks of the stream as well, down by Rock Creek. And we even have plans to plant a pollinator garden along the canal. So restoring native species is going to be critical. There is a spot where, as you walk along the tow path and then the connecting path from the historic tow path down to mile marker 0, where we hope to have a bit of a landing where you can actually stand in front of Lot 1 and look west up the canal. And so I think as you walk along various spots along the tow path, there'll be ample opportunity for bird watching and also enjoying the native world around you. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that, Kelly?
Yeah, that's also the type of activity we're hoping to offer through programming. We actually just had a great DC area wildflower guide created. I believe the creator of that guide is watching along with us tonight. So thank you, Ray, very much for that.
Oh, thank you, Kelly.
You're welcome. Yeah, Ray works with the C&O Canal National Historical Park. So we have a number of guides that we're going to have available on our website shortly that folks can download on their own. These are the types. Georgetown Heritage has offered some programs on this over the years. We had some wonderful volunteers who would lead sort of wildflower walks, things like that. And that's exactly the type of programming we hope to bring back once our COVID season has died down a little bit here and we're able to do more in-person programming. Being able to identify plants and pollinators and birds. I know bird watching is something I always end up enjoying every time I walk along the canal. And that's exactly what we hope to do once it's safe for us to do so again. So.
That sounds fantastic. There's some interest in possibly volunteering. So I'm popping the Georgetown Heritage sign up into the chat right now. That's the Georgetown Heritage website, and you can sign up for the newsletter. So if you're interested in volunteering, Kelly would be the one to talk to.
Yes, and we're going to have a number of canal cleanup opportunities this later this spring and this summer in advance of the new boat coming. So yes, please sign up and stay tuned for that.
A question about the World's Conference this summer, which I'm not familiar with, but the question is, are there plans to be part of it?
Yes, the World Canals Conference is is scheduled, I believe, for late August, and the C&O Canal is the featured site of the conference. There are currently plans, last I checked, and the National Park Service has really been our lead contact on this. There are plans for a day trip from the conference into Georgetown. I think it's going to be like the day before the conference officially gets started. I've talked with my colleague Scott Walzak about participating as a speaker. He is sort of the project director of the Canal Plan and a number of these other initiatives that I know he and the Park Service and I have been in conversation about doing a session with them. And I think we're just sort of waiting to hear back from the conference organizers, last I heard, but we would love to be part of it. And we are definitely excited to welcome them down to Georgetown. Should all the logistics be able to proceed with the pandemic restrictions. I know that's something else we're waiting on, but yeah, definitely excited about the conference and hoping to participate.
That sounds like maybe the mules should finish school before the conference.
We hope
Yes,
so. Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah.
That would be really fun. So continue to pop your questions into the chat. I hope there's more boats questions so I can say boats again. I really enjoy working with all of you and kind of learning about this really rich history. I know we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn as well. So continue to post into the chat. And a good one came in. What happens if something gets stuck lengthwise? A reference to our recent Suez Canal issue. Do you have a plan for if something happens?
Yeah, the park actually does. That is a big concern, especially in flooding conditions, for something to break loose, a limb, a tree, or whatever it may be, and block a gates. And we're going through training. We had our first training on how to operate the lock gates safely. So at Georgetown Heritage in partnership with the park. But even things like the new kayak dock going in as these large sections. And we are working with the park on developing a flood control plan for that. Because you can imagine if they break loose and they go down to a lock, they would act like a lock gate. And so making sure we're able to remove them if there's ever a threat of a flooding incident in Georgetown is important. I'm hoping we don't get the canal boat wedge sideways. I'm not guaranteeing anything until our boat crew is trained and we're going. And like anything that's new, obviously we have a shakedown period. The boat itself will have to be tested up in Maryland. And it's designed to meet all Coast Guard specifications, basically. A few things that it doesn't have, running lights and things like that. But once we understand how to manage and control it, I'm sure we'll be fine. I think it's a top speed of 1.5 miles an hour. Is that it, Kelly? Or maybe it's 3. It's not the fastest machine on Earth, so hopefully we'll be able to handle it as we go through. But all those are real questions that we'll deal with as we learn how to operate the boat.
That sounds fun. I wonder if there's a volunteer position to learn to operate the boat, or if that's left to the staff.
There are a number of boat programs that actually that the Park Service has used volunteers on their boat programs. We do hope to have a robust volunteer corps. We're going to see how this inaugural season goes. As I mentioned, it's a little bit shorter. We are still in the pandemic, but we're always looking for volunteers. If that's something volunteers are interested in doing, part of the boat program in some way, please use that form in the link that I believe was sent out earlier. Indicate that if that's something you're interested in and can do. So.
One more question just popped into the chat about the unhoused population that's using the canal at this time, and if you or your partners at the Park Service has plans to help that population.
Well, we are, yes, it's obviously something that is on our radar, and anyone who has walked along the canal, you can see that people experiencing homelessness are there. And one of our partners, the Georgetown Bid, also works with other local nonprofits within the community to help address those issues and help folks along. So yes, we'll be working in partnership with our friends and obviously the city as well, and doing our best to obviously alleviate the problems. Not something we're capable of doing, but certainly helping people to deal with the situation they're in, and also making sure that we keep a high quality of life experience with visitors and guests who come along the canal as well. So we'll be working with our partners on that. And part of what we're doing with the canal plan beyond that is developing a maintenance plan, a security plan that will go along with it as well. So we hope that, working again with all of our partners, that we can come up with a system of maintenance over the long term for the canal, so that it always, particularly once it's restored, in a pristine condition. And these social issues, we'll do our best to be a strong partner with our local friends and supporters to do the best we can to provide any help. Kelly, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, I'm just echoing that it's certainly something that our partners with the Park Service, the Bid, and the city, I think that's sort of where the strength of that partnership comes in. It is something that everyone is aware of and is working together on. But I think it is good to have such a strong partnership to tackle, these really big issues, and it's something we're gonna all work through together.
And there was a question if this will be recorded, which we are or will be posted. And yes, we are recording this to be posted on the Tudor Place YouTube channel, that and I'll send that out to everyone who attended today, so that if you want to rewatch parts of it, learn more about boats, that'll be available to you. If I've missed your question, please pop it back in the chat so it goes towards the front so I can see it. A new one just came in about the interpretive strategy for the canal history and how that would be distributed. Would there be a pamphlet? What are kind of those canal history communication type plans?
Yeah, so I don't know if this link was shared yet, but the National Park Service website has a lot of information about canal history, both in Georgetown and the whole length of the canal. We are going to have a temporary visitor center sort of open over the summer. It's, as I mentioned, temporary, think pop-up tents and a table, things like that, both to help serve the boat, sell tickets, things like that, but also serve as sort of an orientation point in Georgetown. We will have, for any of you who have visited national parks before, you know, those maps, those long fold-out maps that you can get that show, this one has a whole map of the entire canal on it, but also provides some historical information about the canal in Georgetown, as well as the National Park Service also has an app. They have several apps, I think, but there's one that is of the DC region in particular that has a lot of information about different historical segments along the canal. As for Georgetown Heritage, we are going to be putting more information up on our website. As I mentioned, some of those guides that are available to download, some of them might be a PDF of a walking tour you can do yourself with historical information. We do hope to be able to give that in person sometime as well. Certainly join us for a boat tour. Once those start up, we'll be providing a lot of historical interpretation on those. We do have, Ray is letting me know there's a Georgetown Civil War walking tour coming too. Thank you. I also know the Park Service is hard at work with an African-American historical survey that they're doing of Georgetown and beyond throughout the park. So definitely stay tuned for them. They have lots of good information coming. I will say there is also an interpretation and education plan that goes along with the canal plan. So that outlines different historical themes. It's really sort of serving as our guiding principle for how we're going to further develop our interpretive strategy. We're in a sort of interesting point where we haven't, you know, as Jeff mentioned, we're still in the design phases of the canal plan. So we have a great interpretation and education plan for once the plan really kicks off and things get going, but we're sort of using that to work backwards and fill out our full interpretive strategy for how we're going to get there in the meantime. So it's a really sort of unique position to be on, but we do hope to have a lot of resources to come on our website very shortly here in advance of the boat arriving, but then also begin to offer more in-person programs. So definitely stay tuned, as I mentioned, on our website, our social media channels as well. We do have an email newsletter coming out, and that's what we'll be sharing when all of that programming is happening in person, but also those digital resources as well.
Sounds like there's also a public art guide for the canal on the canal website too, which sounds really interesting.
Yes.
And, and obviously, Kelly has been working with everyone at Tudor Place and Dumbarton House to advance our interpretation and education programs. We're all going through the same struggle of the last year and a half, with obviously school groups not able to attend, and figuring out ways to connect. And we feel a particular obligation to that, since obviously the taxpayers of DC have paid for this boat. So we want to make sure that we give back to the local community. And so part of that education plan was developed in partnership with DC schools to really tie into curriculum standards. And our hope is that hopefully field trips come back sometime. It may not be this year, but maybe next. And we're able to get DC students down to Georgetown, and hopefully for a joint program, maybe at Tudor Place and Dumbarton and Papa Forest in my old job, and the C&O Canal. But certainly that is also on our radar. And we'll keep reaching out as we have to as the pandemic winds down, but certainly reaching out to DC public schools is going to be another aspect of what we do.
Yeah, Kelly and I have been doing a program that talks about the city of DC and how Georgetown changed quite a bit over time, and the canal is a really important part of that evolution of the city, and we've been able to provide that for small groups, and we're doing it for some schools, which is great, and looking forward to continuing to do that going forward. And when you're ready to talk about temporary outdoor visitor centers, Tudor Place is experienced in that that scenario, so we'd be happy to talk further about that as well.
Exactly. I just saw that someone wrote perfect partnership opportunities with CAG. Yes, CAG has a new home right behind us, essentially, in the C&O Canal. So we're looking forward to partnering with them more as well as we move through the next several years.
A question that I think my son would be very sad if I didn't ask. Do the new mules have names?
They do have names, and I have to confirm what they are. So I will look them up and report back.
I believe one called Jennifer, actually? Or was that one of the old mules?
There's a Jenny, and
Jack and Jenny would be ideal.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I posted pretty much all the links again in the chat. A couple requests for the links again. So hopefully if you didn't catch them the first time, you catch them on that second one that I just put in. So lots of great information. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, Jeff and Kelly, thank you both for sharing all this information, both the history and your vision for this. And as a veteran of the Saturday morning canal cleanups, I look forward to those coming back, putting on my my knee-high boots and slogging around in the mud down there. There's nothing more fun than that. But so thank you very much for your program. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Before we go, I want to let you know about a few programs that we have coming up in the near future. A couple of these are exclusively for Tudor Place members. We have a Tudor Talk on May 6th with our Director of Buildings, Gardens, and Grounds, Allison Wally, and Lisa Mundy from the Potomac Rose Society. They're going to be talking about spring rose gardening at Tudor Place and offering some tips for those of you who have your own roses at home. And then on May 20th, our colleagues from Dovetail Cultural Resources will tell the story of archaeological investigations at Tudor Place, and including some of the amazing discoveries that they've made in over a decade of digging here. And that's a Tudor Nights event. So I hear many of you are saying, I want to go to those member-only events, but I'm not a member of Tudor Place. How can I become a member? Well, I'm glad that you asked that. Hillary has placed a link in the chat, or is placed a link in the chat that you can follow to the membership page of our website, and you could follow that actually right now and instantly become a member of Tudor Place this evening. So in addition to having access to interesting programs like the Tudor Talk and Tudor Nights, there are various other perks, but most importantly, you're expressing your support for the preservation of this Georgetown treasure and helping us continue to present programs like the Landmark Lecture Series. So a couple of other programs coming up very soon. On Friday, April 16th, we will again partner with Georgetown Heritage and other organizations to present the next Black Georgetown History Project program. It begins at 1 o'clock. DC-based oral historian Anna Kaplan and Georgetowner Vernon Ricks will share best practices for collecting oral history while exploring Vernon's memories of the neighborhood. And you can get more information about this at tudorplace.org. And then our next lecture in the 2021 Landmark Lecture Series will be on May 11th on the history of the Georgetown Garden Club. So several members of the club will be doing a presentation about the club's history and the service that they have provided to our neighborhood. That lecture begins at 6:30 on May 11th on Zoom, and just like tonight, you can register at our website at tudorplace.org. So we look forward to seeing you all very soon at another of our virtual programs. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and we look forward to the rest of our 2021 Landmark Lecture Series. Have a good evening.
Thank you.